Andy Burnham will not be Prime Minister by Christmas. I do not say that for effect. I do not say it as a dramatic flourish to keep you watching. I say it because the conversations happening in Westminster right now, the ones that never make it into Labour's carefully managed briefings, all point in the same direction. And tonight I want to walk you through exactly why. Because understanding the mechanism matters far more than simply hearing the prediction. If you want an honest account of what is actually being discussed behind closed doors, rather than the version Labour wants you to believe, subscribe now. Because what follows is not built on hope. It is not built on grievance. It is built on a pattern this country has now watched repeat itself 7 times in a single decade. Let us begin with the single most important fact about how Andy Burnham arrived at the threshold of Downing Street, because it explains almost everything that is about to follow. His victory in the Makerfield by-election, the result that effectively cleared his path to the leadership, was built on a coincidence that cannot be repeated anywhere else in the country. Voters who wanted to stop Reform UK voted for him. Voters who wanted Keir Starmer gone voted for him too. Both motivations converged on a single name, in a single seat, on a single day. That is not a mandate. That is an accident of timing, dressed up by Labour strategists as a strategic breakthrough. And Westminster's more serious analysts have already said so, plainly, in terms that should have triggered far more caution inside the Labour Party than they apparently did. His own polling confirms the fragility beneath the surface. His approval rating, which sat comfortably in positive territory only months ago, has already collapsed into the negative, and it did so before he had made a single decision as Prime Minister, before he had faced a single crisis that could reasonably be blamed for souring the public mood. This is unprecedented in modern British political history. Every other incoming leader, however disappointing they eventually proved, was at least granted a brief window of public patience in which to find their footing. Burnham has been denied even that. Let me pause here and ask you something directly, because I think your answer matters. If you have already made up your mind about Andy Burnham, before he has even given his first address from Downing Street, tell me in the comments below exactly when you stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. Was it the moment he refused to say where the money for his housing promises would actually come from? Was it watching him dodge question after question on the boats and the borders? Or did you simply look at the pattern of the last decade and decide you would not be fooled a 7th time? I want to know, because I suspect the answer says more about the state of this country than anything Westminster will admit out loud. Now let me tell you what I understand to be happening inside the Parliamentary Labour Party itself, because this is where the real danger to Burnham actually lies. The lesson every Labour MP took from the collapse of Keir Starmer's premiership was brutally simple. A struggling leader can be brought down quickly, and the MPs who move first against a sinking leader are rewarded for their judgment, not punished for their disloyalty. Starmer discovered, far too late to save himself, that he had no tribal base within his own party, no reserve of personal loyalty, built up over years, that could carry him through the difficult moments. The instant his backbenchers sensed weakness, they moved. And once that movement gathered pace, there was no mechanism left to stop it. Burnham inherits a parliamentary party that has just lived through that exact experience and absorbed its lesson completely. These are not MPs who will extend him patience out of habit or convention. These are MPs who have just watched in real time exactly how quickly a Prime Minister can be removed once enough of his own colleagues decide he is more useful to them gone than kept, and Burnham arrives with even less personal capital than Starmer had, because the manner of his rise, riding a wave of momentum from a single unrepeatable by-election, gave him no time to build the relationships and the quiet political debts that traditionally protect a leader through his difficult early months. I am told, through channels close enough to Westminster to be taken seriously, that the discontent within the Parliamentary Party is already audible, before he has even formally taken office. And the specific concern is one I have raised on this channel before: the complete absence of a costed, coherent plan for government. Burnham has promised continuity with the existing fiscal rules he inherits from the Starmer government, and, at the same time, a significant expansion of spending on social housing and social care. These two promises cannot both be kept without identifying a source of money that nobody, including Burnham himself, has yet been able to name. Labour MPs understand basic arithmetic. They understand this contradiction will have to be resolved very early in his premiership. And they understand that whichever way he resolves it, he alienates a large part of his own support. If he abandons the spending to protect fiscal discipline, he confirms to the voters who believed in him that he is simply Starmer with a warmer accent, the same disappointing continuity in different packaging. If he abandons fiscal discipline to keep his spending promises, he risks the kind of market reaction that destroyed Liz Truss within weeks of taking office. A comparison every serious commentator in Westminster has already begun to make privately. However reluctant Labour figures are to say it out loud, this is the trap waiting for him, and Westminster knows it is waiting, because the contradiction has been visible and discussed since before he even secured the leadership. Let me turn to something else that deserves serious attention: the position of Rachel Reeves, and what keeping her or removing her actually signals about Burnham's credibility. Her record across 2 budgets has been genuinely damaging by any reasonable measure. Significant increases in both taxation and government borrowing, a drag on growth, and a notable rise in youth unemployment relative to other major European economies. If Burnham keeps her as Chancellor, he inherits that record without ever having chosen it, and he cannot credibly claim his government is a genuine break from what came before. If he removes her, he must immediately produce a replacement capable of correcting 2 years of accumulated damage, and to this day, nobody close to Burnham's team has offered a name or a plan that would represent that correction. The insiders I have spoken to describe this as a decision Burnham has been actively avoiding, precisely because every available option carries a serious political cost. That is not the behavior of a leader approaching power with confidence and clarity. It is the behavior of a man who knows, even if he will never say it publicly, that his own platform contains contradictions he has not yet worked out how to resolve. Now let me address Reform UK, because their role in all of this matters enormously to the timeline I am describing tonight. Reform is not a fringe party waiting patiently for its moment. It has been leading national polling consistently. It has won councils that stayed under single-party control for decades, and it has shown again and again that it does not need to manufacture attacks on its opponents. It simply needs to point at the gap between what mainstream politicians promise and what they actually deliver, and let that gap speak for itself. Burnham's platform, with its unresolved fiscal contradictions and its near-total silence on immigration and the small boats, hands reform exactly the material it needs, and I do not believe reform will have to wait long before that material becomes impossible to ignore. The asylum hotel costs will not vanish because the Prime Minister has changed. The boats will not stop crossing the Channel because a new face has walked into Downing Street. Every week that passes without real progress on these specific, measurable issues becomes another week of evidence for reform's central argument, that changing the man at the top changes nothing about the substance of how this country is actually run. Let me bring these threads together, because the prediction I am making tonight does not rest on any single factor. It rests on all of them arriving at once. A parliamentary party that has already learned how fast a weak leader can be removed and feels no particular loyalty to Burnham. A fiscal contradiction at the heart of his own platform that cannot be deferred forever. A Chancellor whose presence and whose removal both carry serious risk. A Reform UK that needs no manufactured controversy, because Burnham's own gaps supply all the ammunition, and a public that has already withdrawn its patience before he has even taken office, meaning every misstep will be read in the worst possible light, not forgiven as early teething trouble. On its own, any one of these might be survivable. Starmer, after all, survived roughly 2 years while facing several of them at once, but Burnham faces all of them simultaneously, with less personal capital than Starmer had, in a political climate that has hardened considerably in the short time since Starmer himself walked through that door. The cumulative effect, I believe, compresses what took Starmer 2 years into a fraction of that time, Let me be careful and honest here. Predicting exact timing in politics is inherently uncertain. I cannot tell you the precise date will fall before Christmas rather than shortly after. What I can tell you with far more confidence is the direction and the underlying dynamic. A premiership beginning with negative approval, a parliamentary party primed to move against weakness, an unresolved fiscal contradiction that cannot survive contact with reality forever, and an opposition that needs no manufactured controversy to make its case. These are not the conditions of a government settling in for a long, stable run. These are the conditions of a government that may be measured in months rather than years, and it is worth asking honestly what this pattern says about British politics more broadly, beyond the fate of any single Prime Minister. 7 leaders in 10 years, each arriving with confidence and leaving in some form of failure, tells you something has gone fundamentally wrong with how this country chooses the people who govern it. We have built a political culture that rewards communication skill, media profile, and the ability to win one lucky by-election under unusual circumstances, and not the harder, less glamorous work of building real policy substance and the relationships needed to survive a difficult premiership. Andy Burnham is in many ways the purest product of that culture. Decades in public life, cabinet jobs held without leaving a distinctive mark, a media profile carefully cultivated as the reasonable, relatable alternative to Westminster dysfunction, and now, at the very moment that profile has finally carried him to the highest office in the land, a complete absence of the substance that office actually requires. Westminster knows this. The conversations happening away from the cameras reflect a level of private skepticism about Burnham's prospects that goes well beyond anything being said in public. MPs are watching the same approval numbers I have described tonight. They are doing the same arithmetic on his contradictory promises, and they are calculating, with the same cold logic that destroyed Starmer, whether their own survival depends on getting early distance from a leader who may not last the year. I do not make this prediction with any pleasure. A collapsing government is not good for this country, no matter who occupies Downing Street while it happens. But pretending Burnham represents a stable, sustainable break from the pattern of the last decade would be a disservice to anyone genuinely trying to understand where this is heading. So watch the approval numbers in the coming weeks. Watch how quickly the fiscal contradiction is forced into the open. Watch how his own backbenchers behave the moment the first real crisis arrives. Westminster already knows what is coming. The only question now is how much time remains before everyone else knows it too. If you want me to keep telling you what is actually being said behind those closed doors, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and before you go, tell me in the comments, does Britain have the patience left to survive an 8th Prime Minister failing inside a single decade? Or has this country finally reached its breaking point? I want to hear it from you. I'll see you in the next one.